Welcome back. So today's video will be kind of long, but what I wanted to do was go through 3 games that I played myself over the board in USCF rated tournaments. And then I thought maybe we could play Guess the ELO. I know the ELO, obviously, and I'll reveal it after each game is done. But what I wanted to do is just kind of go through some actual games of the Collie in the wild, show how forgiving it is as an opening, show the value of active play and not being passive when you play the Collie. And I just wanted to show how once we reveal the level of the players, we'll get a feel for how the vast majority of players at club level aren't very well prepared against the Collie. So, and then it'll be another theme that I want to introduce for an upcoming video. So let's get into the games. Now, the first game was from 2010, actually, and this was right after I came back into chess after, I guess, not playing for over a decade. So this was my second tournament back, and come a long ways since then, and I was really rusty then, and decided to play the Collie. Basically, when I was in college, there was a FIDE master that would teach his students to play the Collie, so I saw that opening played a lot. I didn't know the theory, but I kind of knew the ideas from watching the kids that player coached. So anyway, we get into the game here, and note that it opened with knight to f6, and it ended up transposing back into the Collie. We just keep following our simple development. In our repertoire, we respond to c5 with c3. And we don't necessarily play c3 unless we are forced to after they play c5 or they put enough pressure on the center. So that'll be one kind of thing when we play the Collie. We want to play actively and not spend moves needlessly. And we ended up getting, now in our repertoire, in this position, we play knight b to d2. Back at that time, I just castled. And then we're right back into our mainline repertoire. And in our repertoire, we would actually do d takes c. Got a full video on kind of the mainline ideas. I'll put a link to that above me here. But back at this time, I played it a slightly different way, and I played rook to e1. Now, my opponent made this move b6. And we'll talk about this a little bit. But in the spirit of our opening, we can play e4 now. And so I just did that. And you can see this b6, when he plays b6, it is an inaccuracy. We have almost a pawn advantage now at this point. And so we'll discuss why that is, combining this with the last game I played to kind of see some subtle differences. But we'll go through the game real quickly, and then we'll circle back to this move. Because what you will see is we get this liquidations, which is common in our Colle system. And in this position here, black played bishop to b7. And so what I would do is I would pause. You can see this evaluation bar when he played bishop to b7. Watch this evaluation bar jump up for us. So we have a very, very good position here, obviously. So see if you can find what the winning move is for white in this position. And that move is actually the classic bishop sacrifice. And I plan on having a video on that coming up very soon. We'll discuss this, and it may take more than one video. But this opportunity of sacrificing your bishop on h7 will come up over and over and over again in the Colle system against people who are not prepared for it. And that's one of the things that can be very venomous against club level players. Obviously, titled players aren't going to walk right into this, but people at our level will. So, and what's interesting is I did not play it real precisely from this position, but still won easily. So the idea is this is what we'll examine in future videos. I ended up playing queen to g4 and watch the evaluation bar sink way down. It's still even, and obviously, we have a slight advantage still, and it's a lot easier to play for white, and black probably will not find the best moves to hold this position at club level. But regardless, there's more effective ways of playing that, and that's what we'll examine in a future video when we do a deep dive on the Greek gift sacrifice. This is called the Greek gift because they shouldn't be taking it. So now, actually, see if you can find I did not find it in the game. I played a different move, which was still a strong move, but there is actually mate in 2. So see if you can find mate in 2 here. This is how quickly you can get mating attacks in the Colle. So the mate in 2 is rook takes e6, and they're forced to take with the pawn. And then, of course, we have checkmate. Got all the squares covered. So, but in the game, I did not do that. I actually took with the knight. And you can see I do play imprecisely. Like here, I played king to f1. I was kind of nervous probably, maybe, even though I don't really get nervous in chess games because I don't take them seriously enough. But I don't know. I wasn't playing very well, as you can see. But I kind of walked into this, had to give this back. And it didn't really matter because, as you can see, we quickly get a different mating attack. And this was the end of the game. So you can see I played very imprecisely after that bishop sacrifice. It's something I still have to study more. But, you know, I was aware of the sacrifice ideas from watching these kids that this guy coached, this FIDE master coached, who played the Colle all the time. And it looked like it worked to me. Didn't prosecute it perfectly, but it didn't matter. Mate in 22 moves. So maybe what we'll do is try to see if you can guess what this player's ELO was and guess what their USCF rating is, or if you want to guess what it is approximately in chess.com rapid, go ahead and do that, and then I will give you what kind of the conversion would be. So this player was actually a teenager. I believe he was a teenager. He's probably 13 or 14 would be my guess. And this player ended up becoming a USCF chess master, a national master, later on. And at this time, he had not been playing chess all that long, and his rating was 1381 USCF. And that converts to roughly maybe right around 1500, maybe just a hair under a 1500 on chess.com rapid. And I'll put a link to a video that has and links to a web page from ChessGoals. They do statistical analysis, and they have these really nice rating conversion tables. So if you're interested to see, if you haven't played over the board and you want to kind of see how your online rating would convert to over the board, go ahead and click on that, and that you may find that helpful. So I'll put a link up above at the top of the video here right now, and then as well as in the description as well. But let's actually circle back, because there was an important point that I wanted to point out in this game, and it will come up a lot, especially at club level. So let's go back into this position here, and if you notice, in the game, black plays this bishop to b7 move, and we see that evaluation just plummet. And the reason for that is that it allows us to do this classic Greek gift bishop sacrifice, right? And so we just have a winning position. And, you know, in our last video, we talked about getting e5 in and dislodging this knight from f6, and then we get kingside attacks because, you know, our bishops are opened up, and we can flood pieces in, you know, over to the king side, and look at all their pieces are kind of sitting over here on the queen side. So intuitively, you know, it feels like it would be a good attacking position for us. But one thing I wanted to mention, because the possibility of this in a line my opponent didn't play, but we'll look at the end just for the sake of comparison to kind of set us up for the future when we study this Greek gift sacrifice, is one thing you will notice is that in these lines where black plays b6 to set up this queenside fianchetto, it doesn't usually mix very well, or often doesn't mix well. What I've noticed when they have bishop to d6 and knight to c6. Because you imagine, like, if that knight wasn't on c6 before all this happened, these bishops would have been able to be exchanged off, and therefore wouldn't have been able to, that bishop wouldn't have been able to use to rip open that king side. But because this knight is here, this bishop cannot take our bishop, and now we are in a position to, start attacking on the king side. So we'll take a peek at this in the last game, just to kind of compare that. So let me zoom forward to the next position. Let me get that set up here. All right, and before we go on to the next game, I just wanted to show, I have the Lichess database pulled up here. So this was the game we just looked at, and in this position, my opponent played bishop to b7. And if we look, I have the database set up to be club players on Lichess.com. And you will see that over 9 times out of 10, over 90% of the time, they play bishop to b7. And that sets up our classic bishop sacrifice. But interestingly, only 34%, a little over a third of the players playing the Colle, actually do that sacrifice and play the winning moves. And that's why another reason I think this is like such a good gem, this Colle system for club players, is that it's so compact that if we just spend some time, do our game reviews when we're done playing it, learn along with me, learn it together kind of as I learn more about it and make videos on it. Once we learn these patterns and kind of gain an intuition and an understanding of when certain thematic ideas, like in this case the Greek gift sacrifice, are effective, I think we can have really, really good results. So I just wanted to point that out. Only a third of the people, 90% of the people walk right into it if they get in this position, and yet only a third of the people playing white actually jump on and take advantage and go into that winning position. So I just wanted to touch on that real quickly. But we'll get on to the next game here. All right, so we're on to the next game, and this was actually almost exactly 1 year. It was in 2011, almost exactly 1 year after the first game against the same player. And I ended up getting white again. And remember, as we mentioned, it was a young player. So you can probably guess they're rapidly rising. And in fact, that first tournament, the player, even though he lost to me when I played the Colle, he still gained over 50 rating points in that one tournament. So you can kind of see, like, he was doing well against everything except, I guess, the Colle that tournament, which that's why I'm saying, like, at the club level, the Colle is an effective weapon, because if people aren't prepared for it and it'll be low on their preparation list, they can quickly get in trouble. So this was 1 year later, and you'll notice it starts off very similar. So we play c3 in response to c5. And now he does bishop to b6 a little bit earlier. We continue with our standard development here. And now my opponent plays d6 instead of playing it to d5. So we are in a slightly different setup, but that's fine. We get to safety. And I decided to play queen to e2. In our repertoire, we would probably just, we're trying to set up, we would do the same thing, but we want to get e4 in as quickly as possible, so we're getting enough pieces on e4. So it's kind of funny how, way back then when I hadn't looked at any theory or anything and just kind of winging it, would play the same way. But so now we have a really interesting moment. In this position, my opponent plays g6. So psychologically, just try to think, okay, well, think back to the last game and why my opponent might have played g6 here. And I'm assuming it was because this was a young, talented kid who eventually became a titled player. And I'm sure he remembered quite well what happened on this diagonal in the last game. So, when you play these kind of young, talented kids, they obviously have good memories. They calculate well. So where you want to beat them is on kind of strategical understanding or just having more experience in certain types of positions. And he ends up playing g6, trying to blunt our bishop. And I think psychologically, because of his memory of the last position. And one thing to mention is in the last game, we won because we played actively, right? We sacrificed that piece, did the gift sacrifice, and even though we didn't play it precisely, we won because we had the activity. We were the ones on the attack. And so, yes, this move does prevent us from sacrificing immediately on h7 if he castled. But what it does, the other problem with it is, look at it, creates these dark squared weaknesses around the king, and it spends a move where he's not developed. He's spending a pawn move instead of developing another piece. So he's falling a little bit behind in development. So we took the center, which is, how I would still play it now if I were playing it today. He captures, I capture back. You notice we have more space in the center. We have 3 pieces developed. He has 3 developed as well, but we are also ahead in time because we have our major piece developed, our queen, and we're castled. So we're ahead in development here. So as you can see, we don't have a winning advantage, but we have a nice little pull out of the opening. Almost, 3/4 of a pawn, which is very nice. And now I decided, okay, his king is still in the center, so I'm happy to advance in the center and open up the center, right? If they try to avoid castling because they're afraid of this bishop sacrifice or an attack on the king, well, there's no rule that says you can only attack the king when they're castled kingside. We can also attack their king if they're in the center. Now my opponent plays knight to d5. And I decide to start open up this bishop and start bringing more pieces towards the king side, right? So we're going to discourage him from castling over there. If he sits in the center, we're going to try to rip open the position, get our rooks to the center of the board, barreling down like a couple of cannons. So this is just, it's a hard position for black to play here because it's so easy for us to play. We just need to put our pieces on more active positions, look for opportunities, look at weaknesses that are created when our opponent makes a move. So he wants to get this bishop off the board. And in this position, I ended up playing bishop to h6. I wanted to prevent him from castling. So now he can't castle, so his king is stuck in the center of the board. The computer likes this move here, but what I played ended up working well. I ended up playing it here. And now the thing to note is, yes, he's temporarily won this pawn, but we have a nice little pin against the king, and we can round this up whenever we want. He ends up pushing it, so we just round it up, gain time. And so now look at this beautiful position. You can see the eval bar is slowly moving in our direction as his king is stuck in the center. We have all of our pieces actively developed. This rook is the only piece we have left to develop. I ended up doing this. It's a bit superficial, and it's kind of fun to kind of look at some of these old games. I don't think I would make that move now, but at the time, I did it because I'm like, well, I want to permanently just displace his pieces, keep his king in the center. I saw possibilities of this at some point. So not the most precise. You can see it gave away most of my advantage. But at club level, good enough. I ended up coming in, kind of getting this kind of thing, which I'd seen from studying tactics. Not winning yet with best defense or anything like that. He ends up doing this move here. And I end up doing this move. And this is, I want to give some context for this move. So my opponent, I knew he was going to be a good player because he spent a lot of time, even when he was fairly young, he knew he was in trouble and he was trying to come up with ways to get out. And I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, this was a game in 60 with 5-second delay for each move. And he was down to very little time on his clock. And at that time, I didn't realize, this is kind of a good tip that I'd been taught by some strong players. I had probably 20 or 30 minutes on my clock. He had a couple of minutes. And instead of just playing slowly and making really good moves for him to have to try to defend against with low time, I started playing fast myself, thinking, oh, he's low on time. I'm going to put him under even more time pressure, give him less overall time to think. That is not how you want to approach this. And you can see I actually threw the whole game away. Now, luckily, under the time pressure, my opponent didn't take advantage of this move, but it is an important idea when you get a strong position and your opponent is low on time. Take your time, make good moves, burn out their adrenal glands. They will collapse, and it's more likely that they're going to collapse if you make good moves than quickly pulsing out, mediocre or poor moves like I did in this case. So let's just go. So now he doesn't take advantage of it. I now have the advantage again. This king is really hemmed in here. Allows me this check. It's basically game over at this point. We'll just quickly flip through these last couple of moves. Get this position here. Now notice he cannot take here because we would have this nice little mating pattern. So he plays g5. I mean, what is he going to do, really? I played knight to e7, and he resigned at this point, but he had, like, I don't know, 10 seconds on his clock or something, and I think he just had enough. So the theme of that game was, okay, like, we saw the first game, the castled kingside, made moves that seemed logical, but once our opponent made moves that seemed logical to set up because he thought, okay, well, I got this pawn on e6, so I'm going to put my bishop on b7. Those moves that seemed that made sense on the surface level, which a lot of our opponents will do, led to a raging attack on the king side. This time, the psychological impact from the first time getting attacked on the king side, he knew I was using the same setup, obviously didn't have something prepared for it, and said, okay, well, I'm not going to castle over on the king side, made that weakening move of g6, and letting the center kind of get opened up enough that we got this nice attack against his king. So remember, he was rated 1380. I can't remember if I said 84 during the first game. I looked these up on USCF's site. So this is 1 year later, 1 year and 2 weeks later, actually. And guess what his ELO was in this game? You can either do it in chess.com Rapid or the United States Chess Federation. And his rating, he actually went up 300 points in that 1 year, and he was rated 1684 USCF, which is approximately 1800 chess.com Rapid. So, you can see players at this level still can fall into disaster against the Colle system. I mean, this is a real over-the-board game that I had. And this player was rated 1684, and a very talented player that ended up becoming a titled player. So that's part of the reason I wanted to show this, is kind of encourage, like, you can look up the percentiles of players on chess.com, but like, he'd be in the top 1% of players on chess.com, right? So, and this is 2 times that he's fallen victim to the Colle system, right? And people, 99% of the people that you'll face on chess.com, more than likely are not going to have in-depth preparation against the Colle, and they may go wrong quickly. So that's why I love this simplicity and compact Colle, because it's just like, why learn all kinds of complicated shit if you can just, why learn how to use a scalpel when you can just use like a club or something, right? I mean, it's just so much time wasted trying to learn all kinds of complicated lines and theory and everything else, when most of the people at the vast majority of people's level won't play well against easier systems like the Colle. I know I'm ranting a little bit or rambling a little bit, but I am really enjoying learning, getting back and embracing the Colle. So let me get to the next game here. All right, so our last game, we have to fast forward several years 2018 actually, and playing white, and starts off transposing into a kind of like a collie. My opponent once again plays this b6 setup. So he set up like a Colle system. At that time, I was castling before playing knight b to d2. My opponent puts pressure with c5, so I just play c3. And we are like back into like a kind of back into like a Colle structure, right? And so my opponent plays bishop to d6. And we're going to come back and look at this position a little bit later and compare it with the position that we got in the first game. Because remember how I mentioned with this b6 thing that bishop to d6 and knight to c6 doesn't always pair well, and it can give us some good opportunities. We're going to come back and look and see what would have happened if I would have played this position differently, more in like a true Colle style, where we would have played like queen to e2 and tried to push that rook up there, or played rook to e1 and pushed e4. So we'll come back and look at that. Actually, we'll do rook e1 because that's what I did in the first game, and then it'll be like a kind of a direct comparison, and we'll kind of take a look and try to understand why one leads to the bishop sacrifice, classic Greek gift, and one doesn't. But we'll look at the actual game and do the guess the ELO and then circle back. So in this game, I actually, I will say again, this was a high school kid that I was playing, and I won't say what the rating was, but I ended up playing knight to e5. Now, of course, if we were going to do the Colle, we would set up queen to e2 or rook to e1 and set up this e4 push, and that's how I would recommend playing it today, and that's how I would play it today. But I went for this kind of stonewall setup, which is a good thing that at some point you may want to add on. It's a good add-on to the Colle in certain situations. The stonewall can be really good. If you go into like an advantageous form of it, and maybe that is something that like I will add on, like bonus add-ons to this repertoire at some point after I get enough experience in in this initial repertoire, because there are, like I said, certain things that can be added onto this Colle system that are very effective, and this stonewall can be very effective, especially against kids that are like good tacticians and don't play close positions nearly as well as they play positions where they can use their tactical acumen and calculating ability. So I decided to go into this stonewall attack. And what's interesting is my opponent plays h5 here, which is interesting, and it's not like bad according to the computer. You can look, the analysis doesn't go down much. So that was kind of interesting. I was kind of surprised, and I thought, well, okay, fine. His king's in the center is going to be like the last game. I'm just going to try to rip it open again and just see what happens. And now I was surprised. My opponent plays bishop takes knight. And like I said, it was a high school kid. And I don't know why you would, I mean, it's not a great move. And it lets me once again, like in our last video where we looked at the power of getting e5 in and dislodging this knight, it lets us get that in, lets us keep the bishop pair. So it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And you can see, look at our evaluation bar now. I mean, we have a really good position at this point. My opponent comes in. I'm like, okay, let's develop our piece, open up our bishop, get ready to start flooding in if need be. Now here is another example, and where we see this a lot, where our opponents play c4 thinking they're gaining time on this bishop. Well, fine. I mean, it doesn't matter to us. We got this hiding hole. So it just makes it so that now where does their king go? And now if they go to the queen side, now we have this hook to open up the position, right? So it's just kind of, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But as you'll see when you play the Colle, a lot of times you're going to be facing things that don't make that much sense. And if you just get good at these positions, you can have phenomenal results. So we just push this back. And now it's kind of just compare our positions, right? Like I could take here if I wanted to. That would be good. I mean, it's just like a smorgasbord of opportunities in this position. I end up coming out here, which is fine. So now this defender of the king side has been diverted over here. Start flooding in with our pieces. And the beauty is when you play the Colle, when you get some of these attacks, you don't have to, like, if you can just move your pieces into more active positions, make them weaken themselves to repel your pieces, you don't have to necessarily find instant knockouts. We can see like this is a clearly winning position already, right? And we're on move 16 and we haven't done anything extraordinary at all. Now he plays queen to e7. So now he put his queen on the same diagonal, or on the same file rather, than his king. So let's just start ripping the position open. Grabs is free material. It's just completely free now. And now we have stuff converging on f7, just to note. So what does my opponent do here? You know, I mean, he's in a pickle. He ends up playing g6. I just come back, keep pressure on this point here. If he ever moves his king away to try to castle, then this pawn here, the f7 pawn, is up for grabs. And that's what ends up happening here. So I just calculated it out a bit, make sure you can get by taking the knight. We can. Grab that piece. Come in for the check. I mean, it's just, it's over basically, right? Just get the pieces off the board now. I mean, there's no sense spending a lot of time on this. And my opponent actually resigned here. So I guess we can guess the ELO. Just mention that once again, playing it aggressively, we played e4. He messed up how he played in the center. We kept getting our pieces into active positions. We didn't just play passively, right? Like the Colle, you want to still play actively because you're going to have all these opportunities. So guess what my opponent's rating was. You can either guess it in chess.com rapid equivalent or USCF. And his USCF rating was 1909, which would be about chess.com 2000. And like I said, I'll put a link to ChessGoals rating conversion where they do statistics and convert the online ratings into what their over the board ratings would be. But this converts to about 2000, right? And look at the tremendous position we have. This player was a high school kid, you know, over 1900 USCF. Obviously, you know, a strong, talented player, but against the Colle just struggled. I mean, to put it mildly, I guess. But what I want to do, just lastly before I'm done, I want to go back and look at. Let me zoom up here. Dun, dun, dun. Instead of, we got to this position, and in our repertoire, we would set up for the e4 break. And we would probably do so by playing queen to e2. But let's play rook to e1 and just kind of go down how this might unfold, just so that we can see how this compares to the first game. And then we'll kind of look at a side-by-side comparison, because I do want to do a deep dive into this bishop sack, this classic bishop sack on h7 fairly soon here. And this kind of will help us get an early jump on that. So let's see, if they castle, we play e4, and let's pretend we get these liquidations. Now notice the difference is, without, remember how we said this knight on c6 and bishop on d6 doesn't necessarily mix well with these b6 systems against the Colle? Well, we can kind of get a feel for why that is now, because if we look at this position, if we were to take here, as I was mentioning in that first video, now we get this position here, which is a decent position for us and everything. We have a slight edge, but we don't have our classic bishop sack, right? Because they can trade this bishop off as soon as we take it. They're not going to just let us, you know, hammer away and grab that. Well, they may actually, because like there's so many of the players at club level are unaware of this, or at least it's not on their radar during the game. They just don't feel the sense of danger. But yeah, let me pull up. I'm going to pull up just both of these so we can compare. Maybe it's beating a dead horse a little bit, but let me just pull up a different screen here. All right, so this was my first game that we went through where the player played bishop to b7 in this position. And this is the game that we just played. And if we played rook to e1 here, then we can do a direct comparison. And we see the main difference is with this knight here, that bishop cannot be taken. So it's available for this sack on h7, which I played in the game and which we will want to play. So that's the key. That's kind of the key difference there, right? This knight to c6 and bishop to d6 just kind of don't necessarily mix well when you play b6. But you're going to see it time and time again. Like we said, like in this position here, 90% of the time they play bishop to b7, completely oblivious to the fact that we can just do this bishop sack and it's game over. So anyway, I know that was a long video, but I hope you gained from it. More than anything, I just wanted to kind of highlight that these are real over-the-board games, U.S. Chess Federation rated games. So people are trying to bring their best game to it. It's not like it's an online game where they're tired and they don't really care about their online rating and don't put it all into it. These are players we saw at 1300, 1600, and 1900 levels, struggling to come up with good plans against the Colle, and were unprepared for the Colle. So why not learn something you can learn in a short amount of time, get a lot of experience in the limited amount of patterns that come up, and then expand out after that if you do reach the 2000 level or something and you want to look for more types of positions to play. Well, fine. But this Colle, it's just like a gift, right? In this case, it was a Greek gift, but it's really refreshing to play, to see how we can play something so compact and effective. So anyway, we will catch you all next time, and have a good one.